Hi everyone, it's Claire Gardner-Barnes here, and I'd like to welcome you to the Leading Culture Change session that we're going to have via webinar. I might just give it 1 minute for other participants to join and then we'll kick off. Okay, well, we might get things started. Hello, everybody. My name is Claire Gardner-Barnes. I am leading you through the Leading Culture Change webinar today. And can I put a warm welcome to everybody, put out a warm welcome to everybody who's participating in the webinar today. And a special thank you to the Infrastructure Sustainability Council for organising and facilitating the introduction of this course. So just a little bit about me to kick off. So Claire Gardner-Barnes is my name. I am dialing in from the Gold Coast. I work part-time running my own consultancy firm called CGB Consulting. I'm currently an interim member of the Infrastructure Australia board. And have spent many years in the infrastructure sector as Deputy Secretary in Infrastructure New South Wales, also heading up strategy, planning and innovation Infrastructure New South Wales, as well as Transport for New South Wales, where I was the Deputy Secretary for a number of years. And prior to that, I worked in the Northern Territory as the CEO for Department of Transport. So I had a long history in infrastructure, but also in many other fields, including education and children and families. So I will also introduce Clodagh, who's online, and she will be able to respond to any of the questions that you put online today. Can I ask that participants use the question and answer format? We won't have time to answer those questions. Hi, Clodagh, welcome. Throughout the session, unless there's time at the end, but Clodagh will do her best to answer the questions as they appear online. And just a reminder to use the question and Q&A section button if you don't mind. Okay, thank you, Clodagh. All right, well, I'm going to begin today's session by acknowledging the traditional owners of the country that I am facilitating the webinar from today. I'm working from the land of the Yungabar speaking people of the Bundjalung Nation, and the Infrastructure Sustainability Council would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which each of us are meeting today, acknowledging the First Nations people and their deep connection to land, water and culture, and pay our respect to their elders, past, present and future. And today we also have some participants from New Zealand. And so I think given there also has been recently a state of emergency called in New Zealand, can I offer a special acknowledgement to the Aotearoa people and the participants, and acknowledging the richness and history of their culture and what it brings to the work that we're doing today in sustainability. Just a little bit about the Infrastructure Sustainability Council. Many of you who are working in this area will know all about the rating scheme that's being used for planning, design and construction, and the role that the ISC plays in training and education and capacity building. It also connects suppliers of sustainability products and also brings together experts and sustainability professionals, many who are with us today, and recognises best practice. You can see on the screen there the role that it plays in leadership and thriving industry, market transformation, and organisational health. And today's session is very much focused on the first two of these strategic goals, particularly leadership and thriving industry, by having many of you participants here today playing such a significant role in sustainability leadership, not only throughout your organisation, but more broadly across the industry. So thank you so much for joining us today, and you're warmly welcomed, your participation. So just moving now to what enabling culture change session is going to be about today. There are three really focus areas that we will be looking at, and that's about culture change readiness, how we can make this happen. So as culture change leaders, what can you do practically in your roles, and leading culture change for sustainability. Over the next 50 minutes or so, we will examine some of the aspects of enabling change that will be drawn out in much more detail in the two-day program that will be offered on the 20th and 21st of March. So I'll encourage you at this point to think about participating in that two-day program. We'll be going through the role of culture change in the sustainability area in much more detail. Today, we're doing a brief exploration of the change principles to achieve positive sustainability outcomes, and also looking at your current context. So one of the things that binds us all much more closely together is that we have a shared belief in the value of infrastructure sustainability, and that's really what's drawing us to this webinar today. And that's core belief and passion is what's going to drive a lot of the culture change, no matter what context we're facing, how difficult it might be within your own organisation, and obviously within the changing agenda that's happening, not just within your own project, but more broadly at jurisdictional level within Australia and globally, and how we fit into that. Prior to commencing the session, you were invited to bring to this session your own example of sustainability culture change. And I'd like you to use that example throughout the session to create your own culture change story, or to begin that process. There will be a few activities that we'll use throughout the session. But in addition to that, I'm wondering if each of you could start your own notes for this session with your own pen and paper. I'm assuming you've got some pen and paper or your own device that you can use for drawing, that you draft a large square on that paper. And at the top of that square, if you could name that culture change purpose. And then if you could then decide in each of those, in the square, divide it up into 4 quadrants and head it with each of these following names. So on the top left-hand quadrant, learning about yourself. Then on the right-hand top quadrant, learning about your situation. The bottom left-hand quadrant, your action plan. And then the bottom right-hand quadrant, accountability. And these are just trigger boxes to help you throughout the session as you get new ideas that pop into your head related to these 4 themes, and it will allow you to create a bit of a structure for how we move forward. And Clodagh, I'm just wondering if you could go back to the previous slide, and I'll just quickly go through. On the top half of this slide, you'll see the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and those goals all of you will be very familiar with, and 15 of those are included in the triangle that is below that many of you will be used to. and we're transitioning now from not just looking at the cost, time and quality aspects of asset creation, but now looking at much more strongly the long-term impact of asset creation by including in our thinking environmental, governance and social cultural impacts. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide, which shows really the 4 pillars of infrastructure sustainability. And on that slide, you can see sustainable development, a bit of a definition that's quite useful to think about, meeting the needs and of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And you know, that's so key, because for many of us working in the sustainability area, the future generations is an underlying belief for what drives us. So for the first activity, I'd like you to think about those 4 pillars of governance, environmental, social and economic, all overlapping with sustainability in the centre, and think about what drives and motivates you the most to work in the area of infrastructure sustainability. And we're just going to have a poll now, and Claude is going to put up some information so we can get a sense of the participants here today, which of the 4 pillars drives and motivates you the most as you work towards the area of infrastructure sustainability. So if you could choose one of those areas of environmental, social, economic or governance, and then we'll have a look at those results. Okay, let's see what the votes are starting to show. Now, unsurprisingly, we've got a huge number of you who are looking at environmental as the key driver for you working in this area, followed by governance and then economic and the social. At this stage, with 0 people that impact their not being strong. And I guess the key thing today, as you're thinking about what's driving you and the image of the 4 pillars, is the importance of having 4 balanced pillars in order to create effective cultural change, so that you're able to engage effectively with others who have different values to yourself, different drivers, and ensure that you're thinking about all 4 in how you frame your cultural change activities and agenda. Okay, well, we'll move on, because one of the key cultural change success areas relies on understanding what infrastructure sustainability is all about, which many of you will already be all over that, but also the governance context, your team, their relationships, the systemic impact, the capabilities, constraints, the standards and expectations that are put on you as a leader, and of course the outcomes. And what will be important is having this overall shared goal of driving culture change for positive, sustainable outcomes that is shared across your team. And so the opportunity for you as leaders to have a workshop that will drive out that sort of information. And from the 4 pillars, delving into the real detail of within those pillars, what it exactly is within environmental because that will vary across your team. What exactly is it around governance that's driving people? What is it within the economic frame, and what is it within social? And until you understand some of those key things within your team, within your organisation, and the broader context for how decisions are made, then the cultural change agenda will be limited. So today is an opportunity to be joined together with others in a shared belief who have similar beliefs to yourself. Unfortunately, you don't get to see each other today because it's a webinar context. But if you join the 2-day program, then that will be an opportunity to develop much closer working relationships and develop a strong network of those who have similar shared values. So you're starting to note down your overall driving shared goal. And this is a united force that will give all of us a united strength. And so developing that within your own team, within your own workplace, creates a mindset shift, not just for yourself, but for others in your team, which is absolutely critical to personal growth, understanding the bias that you're bringing. So by looking at those 4 panels, 4 pillars, you start to unpack your own biases, your own belief systems, areas that you need to balance out to create a culture change within your organisation and within your team, and a stronger self-awareness on where the gaps might be that need to be addressed, where there are uneven pillars within your own belief system and then across your own team. So just a little bit now on what is culture change, and that's, I guess, a key question for all of us participating in today's webinar about what culture change is and where it's going to drive us. So we'll just move on to the next slides now that unpacks what culture change is all about. And we've had a bit of an intro around that, about starting with the mindset that you have as a person and really starting to challenge that and self-awareness. Because as you start to do that, and others in your team and in your organisation recognise your change in thinking, your ability to embrace your vulnerabilities in this area, the culture change will start to emerge. So culture change starts with us. It starts with our mindset. And so what does that mean? Our mindset shift is really about our own personal growth and our ability to recognise where our weaknesses and also our strengths are, and to adapt both of those as we influence the cultural change agenda within our own organisation. And that allows us to grow personally at both a professional and personal level. It allows us to get in touch with our own cultural bias, because all of us bring cultural bias to every setting we work within, at home, at work, in every activity we engage in. And so what's important is that we become aware of those biases and how they change and evolve over time. And then once we become aware of them, start to identify where the habits are that have been put in place throughout your life that requires openness to change. And then we start to work out, okay, well, what does it mean to change some of those habits that require lots of practice, particularly for those habits that are well embedded within our thinking and our behaviour, our language, how we talk to each other, how we communicate, the impact on our belief systems, even our symbols and our rituals that impact on our mind. So this is really starting to embrace our readiness and willingness, not only to think differently, but to act differently, to understand what our motivation and willingness will be to be brave in the face of challenges. Because our openness and our readiness and our owning our own biases and our own belief systems is what will allow us to have the courage in the face of challenges to really drive that with determination and strength for ourselves and for our team. And that's where the next step about determination, commitments to change old habits is so important. In moving forward, we need to be able to name openly what those behaviours are that need to change, both within ourselves and also identify those within our own team and our own organisation at a collective level. And that way we're able to shift and embrace sustainable behaviour changes and business practices from one person to everybody's responsibility. It's quite similar to the notion of being a bystander when there's bullying going on, and the notion now of the impact of speaking up when you see that in the workplace. And so what does it mean for sustainability to speak up and actually not just see what's going on in the workplace that doesn't align with your way of thinking and what motivates you around sustainability, but have the courage to face that and the determination and commitment to change behaviour patterns in yourself, your team, and your organisation. Okay, so what can you do when the biggest issue in your organisation is about culture change? So there's a number of steps that it might be worth noting down here. One is about inspiration, and that's really about being inspired by a new idea around sustainability that gives people hope for real change. And by giving people hope, you and the team are then open to a new level of self-awareness and new ways of seeing a problem. So stepping into another person's shoes, it might be your client, it might be your boss, it might be someone that reports to you, but an inspiration is a new idea. It might be a fantastically new idea that can change the world, or it might be an inspiration about something that's just not quite right in the organisation that you all agree on that needs to change. The next step is about motivation. So once you've got that new idea, is there shared motivation to act on this? Do the team have commitment to work together to do this and to do whatever it takes to make the change happen? And that's really about being committed to a higher purpose that drives the passion in the team, and constant reminder when you face challenges that you have got this higher purpose to be motivated by. The third is about courage. Are the team prepared to take the risks, to be brave? Are they open to change, to challenges, facing their own fears, and building deep relationships that are based on trust? Because without those things, the culture change is really not going to happen. The next area is integrity. You will lose all possibility of culture change if people don't recognise that that culture change is embedded in integrous decision-making, integrous action. So this is about building on the strong trust that's been developed in your team to develop new perspectives across the organisation and across the industry, where it's respected with a very strong moral code with clear ethics that drive thinking and behaviours. So when people are critical and look at you and what you're doing with a critical eye, they can see there's very strong integrity behind your behaviours and your communication. And then the last thing is about results. Is everyone clear about what success looks like, how they're going to be measured, how they will be celebrated? Are the results transparent to everybody involved? And are they, most importantly, sustainable? These are the key challenges that we all face through culture change. So if I can just focus now on ethical leadership and That's one of the key challenges for building cultural change practices. When you're challenged about something in a meeting where you need to stick to your own belief system and have the courage to stand up for your own expert knowledge, I'm sure all of us have faced those issues before in meetings. Like, what are the ethical cultural practices that are underpinning the way you work? That's a good question. And I'm wondering if you could just spend just a minute to just note down and get in touch with your underlying belief system that drive your ethical cultural practices, and what would you like them to be? I'll give you an example of some of the ethical cultural practices that some of us might face, because there's a lot of misinformation about sustainability being promoted worldwide at the moment that infiltrate the workplace and has impacted upon decision making. You know the truth that someone might be trying to infiltrate decision making at a leadership level, where your expertise might be put into question. And so one of the key ethical principles might be bravery in your leadership and making the judgment call to ensure the truth is maintained and documented. So no matter what the decision is in a meeting, you have it clearly documented what is the expertise is that you've brought into that decision making, and the strategic decision is based on a record of that, so that there's a clear understanding within the room and within the decision makers who are surrounding you that you're not willing to back down, and you'd like that clearly recorded. So there's an ethical basis for how you go about facing some of the cultural practices that might be going on in your organisation, and being clear about what those ethical issues are based on. What is it that ethically that defines you as a leader? That's one of the key things that others will look at when they're eyeing you off with a critical lens. And it's important for you to be really strong in your own ethical practices if you're going to drive cultural change, and that you stick to that, and that your team around you sticks to that, and you're really ethically aligned in your thinking. And you understand then, what will these practices mean for sustainability outcomes? One way to go about that is to run a number of different scenarios within your own team and how you would each react. What will be drawn out through that sort of scenario work is unpacking what it means and respecting each other's perspectives for how their own ethical leadership evolves and what underpins it, because you will each have different ways of responding to an ethical dilemma when sustainability outcomes are presented to you, and be open to challenging those, but also not judging others. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide, which is really about the key influences and who are they. So it's important for you as a cultural change person within your organisation, within your team, and with the industry more broadly, that you have a very clear understanding of who is influencing you, who's trying to influence you, and who actually is influencing you. And having an open mind to that, and being very self-aware of who those people are, who those organisations are. So With this in mind, I'd like you to draw a bit of a map with yourself in the middle, and similar to the slide in front of you, start to name who those key influences are. You might like to represent them as a symbol because they're a positive influence, or you may, in fact, like to represent them in your drawing as a negative image because they're not a positive influence on you or your team. And then as you start to draw that ecosystem that surrounds you, that influences your culture change agenda, draw a line between you and each of those influences. It might be a really thick, tight, straight line that will demonstrate that there's a very strong, open, transparent, trusting relationship with that influencer. And then it is actually a two-way relationship. So you've got arrows at both ends of that line. It might be a dotted line, which is zigzaggy or wiggly. You don't know what it means. You're not sure how strong it is. You don't know if there's a real commitment. There's a commitment from your end, which is showing an arrow really strongly from you, but you don't feel it reciprocated. Or vice versa. You feel like someone's trying to influence you significantly and you're not having a bar of it. So reflecting on why that is, and are they a key person that you in fact have been avoiding and you really need to start to engage with. So this ecosystem map is a really, really important part of the cultural change agenda. Who are those people you need to draw in much closer to you, or get those arrows, making sure that they're arrows that face both ways? And who are the people that in fact are influencing you in a negative way that need to be pushed much further out from your influencing ecosystem? Or are they a complete distractor from your core work as a cultural change expert? And at this point in time, you're just going to leave them on the side until you really focus on what you need to prioritize. So this will take some time to unpack, time that we don't have today, but it's really important work to understand who's dominating, who's close, who's far away, who's positive, who's negative, and really come to a clear understanding of what that ecosystem looks like and what the role is in those relationships in cultural change. Are they beneficial or harmful? And what's the broader context in which you're working? Can you identify who those people are and the extent to which they're influencing you as a leader? How are they influencing your broader team? And how are they influencing the broader industry of sustainability and infrastructure? And is that why you might need to bring them in closer to you and start connecting? Without understanding this context, you're probably not networking the way you need to if you're going to create a significant culture change. Okay, we're going to move on to the next activity now. So you've got the infrastructure, sustainability, cultural outcomes that I need. Leadership dynamics, which is about trust and respect. How do we connect? So that's about the team dynamics. So not just amongst the leadership team, but your own team and how they're connecting more broadly across industry and your organisation. How we advocate. support for industry and innovation? How are we really driving that? And do we have a clear plan for how we make that happen? How we collaborate with stakeholders and others. The governance for decision-making processes. And inclusion. So what does diversity mean for the overall goal of infrastructure sustainability and the cultural outcomes you need to lead? So this is really about your role as leader. And what I'd like you to do here is think about yourself as a leader and the future that you'd like to create as for sustainable infrastructure, and start to identify where is the gap in your organisation that needs to be filled. When you think about all these elements, where is the hole? Where is the gap? And if long-term sustainable projects are going to be successful, where do you need to focus your energy and effort? That requires you to understand the underlying cultural issues in your workplace and where you need to address to achieve the overall goal of infrastructure sustainability. What are the cultural outcomes that you need to work on? So when you look at that list, are you able to put a number that will give them a hierarchy of where you're putting your energy and effort now, and how that might need to change if you're really going to create the cultural outcomes that you need to lead? Okay, we might move on to the next slide now. And I know we're rushing through this, but the 2-day program will allow you to go into this in much more detail and give you time to reflect. What we're focusing now that we've raised a range of issues around the things that you need to consider personally, professionally, within your team and within your organisation, and what some of those gaps are, how do you create a culture change plan that will help you move to the point you need to be to create culture change success? And that starts with defining the first few cultural issues you'd like to focus on. How do they link to your overall goal of infrastructure sustainability? So is there clear alignment there? And this requires some critical self-thinking. If not, why not? If there is complete alignment, then how has that gap emerged? How will you address that gap? It requires you to be really specific in your plan. So that means being realistic, being conscious of the outcomes that are going to be achievable. So being realistic and being honest with yourself about when you can achieve those outcomes. Putting your critical hat on and asking yourself, why these? And are these the right ones for this time, because timing is everything. Who will support you in order to deliver these outcomes? If you haven't got your own close team on board yet, or your line manager, your direct reports, you're going to need a lot of support in order to deliver those outcomes. So who are you going to rely on, and what will that look like? What support do you need to deliver? Not just who, but what. And then who will hold you to account for the delivery? For culture change to be effective, accountability is key. So is there a cultural change plan in place in your own mind starting to emerge now? Are you starting to identify where the gaps are that you really need to reflect on and think about within yourself and within your broader team? And start to think about with your own boss and have those discussions with. These are really important questions to be able to answer if you're going to have success in delivering on culture change. So the next slide talks about relationships and toolkits. Do you have the relationships and tools to use across your ecosystem effectively and successfully to implement sustainable outcomes when you know there's very different maturity levels across different teams and across your organisations and within members of different teams? This could look like active and visible executive sponsorship. Do you have that in place right now? How active is it? Do you see them as standing right beside you as a highly visible executive sponsor? And how can you make that visibility more effective? Structured change management approach. Is that clearly documented? And do the executive support that approach? Is it clearly planned out, scrutinised and agreed to? Do we have dedicated change management resources in place? If that's not the case, then it's a sure sign that there's not commitment at the executive level. So how are you going to change that scenario? And if that's one of the key issues that many of you are facing today, then how can we address that collectively as a group? And that's probably something that we could work on in the 2-day program in March. Integration and engagement with project management is critical so that from the ground up, from early planning days of strategic planning right through to detailed planning, the integration across projects and engagement with those key members, project management teams. So there's cross-learning happening across those teams and stronger relationships being established around and focused on sustainability outcomes. Employee and contractor engagement and participation. To check that we're all on the same page, that we have the same expectations, similar understandings of accountabilities on both sides, and relationships of trust around risk. Frequent and open communication is key. That is really open and trusting. And if that's not established within you and your team, within your organisation, or with key stakeholders, then that might be the key focus of your plan as step one. And then we've got engagement with middle managers. All of us will have experienced the key role middle managers play in clear and open and transparent communication up and down the supply chain. And so engagement with those middle managers and understanding what their ecosystem looks like and where the strong links and the weak links are will be key to cultural change right across your organisation. So, leading culture change. Is it about, instead of constantly adapting to change, why not change to be adaptive? So that requires constant change and being open to constant change. And in fact, that's how human beings are made to work, to deal with change. The key is creating a safe environment for people to face that change and take on the challenges. And so as a culture change leader, a lot of your role is about creating that safe place where people can be honest and open without feeling judged, and evolving from communicating the benefits of sustainability to sustainability in action and implementing that change. That requires a lot of work and a lot of understanding of yourself and self-awareness, as we talked about right at the beginning, a commitment to addressing the obstacles, a willingness to engage in some of the relationships that are really difficult to manage, and making sure that there's a focused and deliberate plan on how to make this happen with sponsorship and tools that people are skilled in using when they face challenges. Today, we looked at culture change readiness, how we can make it happen, leading culture change for sustainability. And some of those areas all of those areas will be addressed in the 2-day program that has been developed. We will also hear in the 2-day program an opportunity to hear from industry leaders, sustainability professionals like yourself, as they talk about their stories, about how they've addressed barriers around cultural change that they've faced when trying to champion sustainability and how they overcome them. And whilst we're all very conscious through the culture change agenda process that everybody has different contexts, and understanding those contexts will mean you need different nuanced approaches. We will need different tools for different timings and different contexts, because we all have different teams with different personalities, different levels of maturity. By sharing each other's experiences and developing a real community of culture change experts, that helps create that environment of trust and safety that's required for long-term change to be achieved. So I will, at this point, introduce Clodagh, who has been supporting me throughout the development of this program. Hi, Clodagh.
Hi, everybody.
I'm just wondering if there have been many questions put up on the Q&A throughout the session.
No, we haven't received any questions yet.
Okay.
You're doing an amazing job of explaining culture change and the principles. I would like to take this opportunity to thank individuals for their patience. We did experience a couple of Zoom issues earlier, so I'd just like to thank you all for your patience while we got those sorted. And to anybody who did not get sorted, I look forward to them watching this recording later. Please feel free to take this opportunity to add any questions that you may have. And let us know if there are any, if there's anything pressing that you would like to talk about.
Thanks, Clodagh. One of the key things that this taster does give you an opportunity to do by adding in questions at this point allows us to make some modifications to the two-day program. So if there's some key areas you felt we didn't address in this 1 hour taster that you'd really like to have unpacked in the two-day program, it'd be great to have those questions put into the Q&A section now, so we can adapt the program to make sure it meets your needs. This is an opportunity for you to look at some of the notes that you put down at the start of the session, and I did ask you to, for those of you who didn't have any hiccups along the way, to use a quadrant to provide a structured way of looking at your learnings throughout the session. Learnings about yourself, learnings about the situation, the context in which you're working within, also looking at the plan that you'd like to create in order to ensure that we do create sustainability, culture change through a well-planned approach, and also, most importantly, how you will keep accountable for implementing that plan and being true to the learning that's happening with both you and your team and across the broader context, and how you start to map out the change that's happening within your organisation. Any questions that have appeared so far, Clodagh?
No, we haven't gotten any questions in so far. So I suppose this would be a fantastic time to announce that for anyone who has attended this webinar, I'm going to send you through a really special offer for the full course, Leading Culture Change, where you are able to receive a significant discount on the two-day course as a thank you for participating in this webinar with us today, and as a token of gratitude from the IS Council to all individuals who come to work with us and come to engage with us in our training department. So thank you so much.
And for those that might have had difficulty at the beginning of the session, I did call out that New Zealand is in a state of emergency at the moment. And so if all of us can just be mindful of the issues that they've faced for a long time, and as a result, the key leadership role that they've played globally around sustainable infrastructure responses. And no doubt this state of emergency will once again provide them with opportunities to think out of the box, to come up with new solutions. And it's great to have them as partners for the Infrastructure Sustainability Council, because they bring so much richness and wealth of knowledge and some really critical issues that they face so regularly within their own environment.
And we've just had a really lovely bit of feedback already, very inspiring. It's going to take a few moments to process everything. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for that, Clodagh. And I am conscious that there was a lot crammed into this hour. And the approach that I've taken, because I'm an executive coach, is very much about a coaching approach. It's very focused on reflective thinking. It's very much about you taking autonomy for your own leadership capabilities and for the action that you're capable of within yourself and for leading within your team. And this is very much about reflecting on how you might take the agenda forward through an executive coaching methodology.